All right. Is there anything you want to mention, Allison, before we get underway?
I am equal parts terrified and thrilled to be here.
Excellent. The terror is useful. It might spur action. Okay. So
terror happens right before change.
Yes. Allison, what I'd actually like to do first is have you give us a rundown of all of the different things that you're doing. I've tried to capture some of the pieces here as representative of the many things that you do. You emailed me with an amazing list of things that you're dealing with, which I forwarded that to Mark, and I think I put OMG at the top with like 10
which
exclamation points.
From you.
Yeah. So tell us what you're juggling.
Okay. So I am the social media editor for Brevity. I blog twice a week for Brevity, which means sometimes I write it myself. Sometimes I am responsible for posting somebody else's blog. Both of those take almost exactly the same amount of time because usually when I do it for somebody else, I do a little bit of editing. I am a freelance editor and I am booked all the way up through like the middle of March with people's full manuscripts. I also host retreats, which is probably the thing I like doing the most, or the second most, which I'll get to. I have a retreat coming up in Costa Rica in March, the 13th through the 20th, that I handle everything for. I book the venue, I find out what everybody's COVID status needs to be, I handle the transportation, I book, who's going to cook and what are the meals going to be like and all that kind of stuff. So I'm basically the event planner as well as the retreat leader or co-leader, because Dinty W. Moore comes along for some of those. I lead virtual intensives, which is more like a workshop, like a 5-day workshop where we have classes and a little bit of writing time and a little bit of networking time. And I co-lead those with Dinty W. Moore. Again, I process all the payments. I set up all the Zoom links. I write the workbook. I do all the graphic design. If you hate those Easter eggs, that's all on me. I also co-lead the Writer's Bridge with Ashley Renard, who is an absolutely amazing partner. And if I had more relationships in my life like that, my life would be better, because Ashley and I have this weird symbiosis where we very rarely have to formally split up who's going to do what. We just do it. And we do it correctly the first time. And one of my biggest challenges with delegating help is I don't really trust very many people to know what needs to be done to do it correctly the first time without me having to walk them through it so much that it's just faster to do it myself. I wrote a book called 7 Drafts that came out in September. And I got to tell you, I am so thankful that I have spent 10 years being a good literary citizen and promoting other people's books, because I had like 0 time available to promote my own book. And thank goodness, all I really had to do was repost other people's social media posts, because people were kind enough to do that for me, which was amazing and a total honor. And then I also do office hours, which I really enjoy doing. I like having these like one-off or like 3 or 4 off coaching meetings where people can book my time and we either talk about their work. Sometimes it has no prep at all. They just turn up, they tell me what their problem is, and we talk about it then and there. Sometimes they get like 10 pages edited in advance. I have a couple of clients who are last minute turnaround people. Mostly they're clients who have been grandfathered in over a long period of time, and I love them as human beings. And so it's like, here is my 2 pages that I need for this speech I'm giving on Friday. Can you turn it around for me now? And they're usually jobs that only take like 15, 20 minutes to do, because I'm a very fast editor, but it's another thing landing on my desk that feels like an interruption as much as I love the actual work. And the thing that I also love doing the absolute most is teaching webinars, which I got into because of COVID. I had never done this kind of virtual teaching online before. I had been gradually working up my courage to approach Jane to maybe ask her if she would consider hosting me for a webinar. And she actually contacted me first, like several months before I thought I was ready. And it was like, but then I've started doing that, and it has been incredibly rewarding and fun. And now I teach webinars for a couple of different places, Jane included. And I think that's what I've got. And then I also try to have some kind of a personal life. I'm working on another couple of books, some of which are back burner, some of which are front burner. And I'm on social media between like an hour and 2 hours a day in like little tiny 5 to 10 minute chunks. And in our house, my husband takes care of all the housework, but I am the external errands kind of person. Like I never want to clean another bathroom in my entire life. Fortunately, my husband is great at it, but he finds it tedious and annoying to run around and do the grocery shopping, or, you know, this needs to be dropped off here and we need to fill out this paperwork. And I do that stuff too at home. I think that's about everything. I have no pets, I have no children, and all of my relatives live more than 4,000 miles away. So at least I don't have those. And I have no social life. I really have no friends. Except all of you who have turned up here today to see all this. Most of my friends are virtual friends, and I actually really love that.
Okay, so that I want everyone to know that is a lot. That is a lot. If it sounds like a lot, it is. And to some extent, like for me, it's like looking in the mirror a bit. And you know, I'll talk about this more specifically as we get into the logistics of how to correct for this, or how to like get some part of your life back. But I warned Allison before we got on the session today that I'm like the recently converted, because I have dropped so much work within the last 6 months, especially. And I've never been happier. So I'm not going to say that dropping work is the only solution, but I think it's a big part of the solution. So, and I think Allison, you probably know this to some extent, just you need the push. So the way we'll tackle this is we'll first talk about like the mindset issues that often lead to this situation, which I am very familiar with. And then there's a very special exercise we will do to be revealed, the QBR exercise. And then we will talk about the tools, processes, and the delegation question, because they're definitely, like when I looked at the lists of things that you're doing on a more granular level, it's like, okay, yes, there are ways to be more efficient here, although that's not what I would tackle first. I think first we want to do mindset. And as I was preparing for this session, I noticed in Allison's Twitter feed something that looked very familiar to me. Would you like to recite this Twitter thread?
So I wrote this at what was about 2 o'clock in the morning, my time. I had just completely redone a PowerPoint for teaching a college class the next day, which was going to be 2.5 hours of teaching in person, standing up the entire time. And then I couldn't get my brain to shut off. Like I try to lie down, and then my brain's like, maybe you could just do this one more thing. Maybe you could just do this one. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just play my little word game on my phone, because usually that helps me drop off. And then I touched the email icon and it was all over. There were like, especially because Eastern time is where most of my clients and my business are. If I open my email at 2 a.m., I have all of that day's emails from the people who just finished emailing me at the end of their workday back in New York.
Yeah. So email has been my nemesis for like at least 6 years, basically ever since I went full-time freelance, and then things started to pick up. So that were like around 2015 or so. My heart would start racing when I was like getting ready to open the email application. I have an Apple Watch, so I can like actually measure my heart rate over the day. I could like see like blood pressure spikes because I was concerned about what I was going to find there. And yeah, for me, it was a huge quality of life issue. And it's also
1,400 in my inbox right now.
Yeah, I can't even like it's and that's not to say that the people filling my inbox, I don't like them. Like, it's not about that. It's not about dealing with bad people. It's just the volume. It's the people who need things that you are responsible for. It is so much weight. And you know it's sitting there even if the application isn't open. And I'd be on vacation, I'd be on holiday, my family would see me on my laptop and like, "You're not doing work, are you?" "No, just checking email." It's just
I swear I'm not really working. I'm just doing social media. That doesn't
right,
count, right?
right. Just clearing out the email. So yeah, it's a huge warning sign, obviously, when this is happening. Okay, so here's some other like phrases that maybe people listening, you've said these phrases before. For me, they've become red flag phrases. Allison, I imagine you might experience this too. If I can just make it through the next whatever period of time it is, it could be days, weeks, or even months. I've actually said, if I can just get through the holiday season, I'll be fine. And it's a coping mechanism. Like, it's not fine when you get to the end of that period. There's always something else, always.
And I keep thinking, okay, well, it's really busy right now. But as soon as I get all the right now stuff done, it's not going to be really busy anymore. And I ended up, because of COVID, all of my travel time has been kind of last minute planned this year, which means that I've been like, "Oh, I'm going to be on the road for 3 weeks," except that's also when I'm supposed to do a webinar each week for Jane, and I'm not finished with the slides yet. And then I end up spending a chunk of my vacation time on, okay, I got to make slides. I've got to answer emails. I've got to, respond to participant questions, which I love doing it. And it's this conflict between, I love being on vacation with my husband in a beautiful foreign location. Aren't I privileged? And I love being able to give people advice and help them with their problems and fix what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brian mentions in the chat, then you get sick at the end of whatever period of time. Did that happen? Like, I would travel. This was right before the pandemic started. Every time I traveled, I would come back sick. That there's another warning sign too, because you're depleting all of your energy stores. Okay, so the next thing is, if I could just be more productive, which in some ways this isn't like a bad thing, because you start to really discard the things that are unnecessary. You actually do put usually better processes in place. Allison, I'll never forget seeing during your developmental editing webinar, I think it was a Scrivener file where you had all of the pre-written responses for the most common problems you see in manuscripts. Like, that's genius. Like, every editor who works on similar types of work should have those stock responses. I have something similar, and however, being more productive is not the solution. I have found.
Well, and I want to channel more of my productivity into things like that, because those pre-written responses then became the backbone for my book. So yes. It was like, it was a time saver, and later it became a moneymaker all on its own. And I'd love to do more things like that.
Yes.
Incidentally, I'm already like in your chat planning a new project with Heather.
Very nice.
I can't stop. I can't stop. It's like a disease.
Well, that kind of leads me right into the next point, which is you start thinking these crazy thoughts like, how can I get two more hours into every workday? Like, I'll wake up earlier, or I will clone myself, or like you would start imagining these solutions that are actually just going to make your life worse if you're able to enact them. You'll just end up filling that time with more work rather than finding a way to actually breathe and not have your.
And when there's so many things on my list, I feel lazy if I like lie down and rest my brain by being on my phone or, taking a walk or whatever. And I feel like, oh, there's stuff I should do. And I feel like, oh, I don't deserve to do this fun thing until I have done the work, because I grew up with, you have to finish your broccoli before you can have ice cream.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we have identified all of the signs of a problem that needs to be solved. Now, for some people, I don't know if this is true for you, Allison. For some people get into this because of a scarcity mindset issue, where you think at some point your luck is going to run out or the work is going to run out, something's going to happen and you will never have another client again. So you have to take it all while it's there. Like you have to jump on the opportunity. You have to milk this for all it's worth because you're going to expire like milk.
Must take gig, don't know where next gig is coming from. Must take gig, don't know where next gig is coming from. And it's kind of like, I've been making my living as a freelancer since I started making a living. It's, you know, it's been more than 30 years. And yet I still have this idea that if I don't take this next gig, maybe no one will ever hire me again.
Yes. Yes. Now you realize that's not rational, correct? Like you're very smart.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I've heard you counsel other people about this issue.
And yet there's still part of me that's like, oh, Allison, how dare you think that you will still have work, that people will still want to work with you? How arrogant is it to think you're that good? And yet there's also a part of me that knows I am that good. There is plenty of work out there. There is so much work that I am passing work to my friends and my fellow editors. There is enough. There is enough for everybody. There's enough money. There's enough love. There's enough writers. There's enough gigs.
There is enough. There is definitely enough. There are all sorts of like tricks of the mind you can use to help yourself out of this. Like, well, I can close to this or stop taking this today. I can always come back to it if it doesn't work out. Or, oh, I've got that great friend in Jane or Ashley or Dinty or whomever. If I'm stuck, I know they'll put out a call for me. Or like, you can always say, I know I've got people like you, and you are Allison K. Williams. Like the connections you have, the work you've, like, it's not going away. You will always have those assets and resources, always.
Well, and it's funny because I spoke briefly in the developmental editing course that we taught Jane, where I said, you know, part of what made me a great editor was being a stripper when I was a lot younger, because I talked to a lot of people about a lot of jobs and learned to be interested in everything everybody had to say. And one of the greatest things I ever learned in that job was a woman came up to me at the end of the night and she said, you know, how'd you do tonight? And I was in high school at the time, you know, whole nother story. And I'm like, I made $100. It was awesome. She's like, I made 500. You sat with that table too long. And I'm like, I did. And she's like, they will always welcome you back. You have to get up and walk away when it's not paying you, because they will always welcome you back. And I feel like there's still stuff in my life that I'm clinging to because it's what was supporting me when nothing else was paying me. And it's really hard to walk away from that and trust that there's going to be something better.
Yes, I totally get it. The hardest thing I let go of work-wise were query and synopsis critiques. And part of it was they were so damn profitable. Sorry to anyone for whom that might be an insult.
And they're easy. They're a fast turnaround. Once you have the expertise, you know how to fix stuff fast in them. There's an immediate result. And then it's so rewarding because people email you later and go, my book finally got accepted. You know, and it's like, I helped with that. I feel so good about it.
It is so rewarding and satisfying. And like you said, for when you get really expert at it, it goes quick. You can knock them out really, you know, 1, 2 more a day. It was hard to let go of that. I think another issue I see for you, Allison, I think you're genuinely excited to do all these things that you're doing and you're good at them. It feels good to be a master at these things. And there's a feeling of abundance. You feel important, you feel successful, but it's making you miserable. So we have to stop. We have to stop.
I do have more days than I would like where I get to like 3/4 of the way through the day and I'm like, I'm so tired, I want to cry.
Yes. Yes. So I have this nice little moment from Alice in Wonderland with the Red Queen. It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. And, you know, I think right now, Allison, you're like in the survival trap, which is getting through today at the utter disregard for tomorrow. So I think, you know, we're going to go through the QBR exercise and we have to start looking at what we're losing, like the great loss this is creating that we're not even maybe cognizant of until we stop the running. And I'm as bad, if not worse, in all of these tendencies. I put up this Facebook cover image for myself as a reminder, like in 2015, this John Cleese quote, I read some interview with him about if you're racing around all day, ticking things off lists, keeping all the balls in the air, you're not going to have any creative ideas. And for me, that's true. Now I realize some people disagree with this, like they're going to have creative ideas no matter what. And I think that describes you, Allison, which makes it infuriating. You still have all the creative ideas, even while you're running like a million miles per minute. My creative side just kind of shuts down.
And it's not a lack of creative ideas. It's that I don't have time to then fertilize those ideas and bring them to fruition. I end up writing, and I mean, it was a successful process because I did get through another draft of my novel, but I worked on my novel 10 pages a month because I had to write it before I met the writing group, and so it's like, all right, 10 pages a month and I've got the full draft, but I would really like to sit down and do it in a tighter span of time with more open brain space.
Yes. So I want to see Allison serve Allison's vision and creative projects, all those things that aren't happening, the books that aren't getting written and published, the bigger visions that aren't being served because you're spinning so fast in all of these different lines of work. Now, here is I hope the one thing people can take away from this, if they take nothing else. There is a really great book that I learned about called Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz. I recently read this, which has really changed my mind about what I work on, how much I work on it, what I'm dropping, what I'm keeping. Now, Allison, do you know about this book?
I do not, but I am writing it down so that I can order it off Amazon as soon as we get done.
Okay.
I mean, from my local independent bookstore that delivers to Dubai.
Excellent. So you can see the subtitle here is Design Your Business to Run Itself. Now, I don't agree with everything that's in this book, but I would say especially the first 3 to 4 chapters are absolute gold for anyone in your situation or anyone who's dealing with overwhelm. And the core message of the book is, and it's a really simple idea to understand, is that if you don't decide or devote time to designing where you want to go, others are going to pull you or push you in their direction, usually for their benefit. It's not that you aren't benefiting, but you're not achieving whatever long-term vision you have for your career or for yourself. Okay, so there are some really initial easy questions that this raises that you've probably thought about this already. Some of what you've already said indicates you've thought about these things, like what's the work you love? What's the work you definitely want to keep? What would you miss if it went away? There's also types of work that you kind of stumble into that's profitable, but ultimately it's not serving who you want to become in however many years' time. And then there's some work sometimes that we do that we can do it, but it's not necessarily catering to our strengths. So immediately, do you think of things that you're like, yeah, I really need to, and I'm not talking about Excel stuff, which we'll get to later. Are there things that you feel like, yeah, I probably don't need to be doing that work for money anymore?
It's interesting that you bring this up, and I really like these questions. I definitely had a mindset shift a while ago where I started to learn, okay, just because I could do a thing and be good at it does not mean that it belongs on my plate. As far as what I don't like, I think the biggest challenge for me is I don't like feeling crappy about not getting stuff done on time. And the place where that's the biggest challenge for me is full manuscript edits. I'm really good with my coaching clients where it's a chapter a month, turn it around, out the door, and it goes. And I like editing full manuscripts. I enjoy it. I love the people. I love reading their stories. They're good stuff. I don't like how I feel when I'm not getting it done on time. So I don't know if that's a stop doing that work or if that's a find a better way to approach how I do that work. And some of that was by restricting the number of them that I took on. But I've kind of been leaning towards, well, maybe I should start saying, okay, well, I do the coaching work. And if you want more than that read at once, you've got to come to the retreat. And that's where I do that. but
Yep.
it feels like it's such a core part of my business. It feels like it would be really weird to walk away from.
Mhm.
And I'm also worried that I'm accidentally insulting all of my current clients whose manuscripts are in my queue. And I got to say, it is not the manuscript. It is absolutely not the manuscript. It is a me
Yeah.
mindset issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely an element here of sometimes your lifestyle or your other types of work start to exclude doing certain services or editing. And that may be one of the issues here. You just, even though you're good at it and want to do it, you just have to let it go because of the other things that are going to take a higher priority. These are difficult decisions. And I don't think we're going to solve it in the next half hour. That said, here is something that you should chew on that comes out of the Clockwork book. He spends a lot of time on this, deservedly so. The QBR, or the queen bee role. So the little story or metaphor he uses, which is quite obvious, is that of the bee colony. And the fact that there's this queen bee that all of the workers are essentially serving. And as long as the queen bee is fulfilling her role of laying the eggs, everyone does their job and everyone's very, but as soon as she stops doing her role, everyone's focus returns to either replacing her or fixing things so she can return to laying the eggs, because otherwise there's no more colony. So when we look at this from a business perspective, there is something, or there's a role being played. And for a one-person business, obviously you are playing this role that is critical to the business's success. If you have team members, or if you're in an organization with a hierarchical structure, then there's usually one person whose time needs to be protected so they can keep fulfilling the role that makes the business successful. Okay, so it's usually, he emphasizes again and again, this isn't about a person, because a queen bee can be replaced with another queen bee. It's a role that you're fulfilling. So to identify the QBR, he has a really intensive exercise you can do. We will not do that here, but the book will describe it if you need it. Essentially, what he's asking is, what does your business success hinge on? Or what do you want to be known for? And I'll offer some quick examples here. You might be running a business where you're helping other small business owners succeed. You might be designing the most comfortable jeans in the world. You might be providing a moral compass for the community. Let's say you're a chaplain at a university. That would be your QBR, quite possibly. You might be writing literature that humanizes mental illness. You might be making people laugh. So these, I'm trying to show the breadth of QBRs that can be out there. My QBR, I think, these things can change, is educating writers with transparency and integrity. So everything, I started narrowing things down to just this. I dropped a lot of services that I was providing because I was only educating on a one-on-one basis, and I would much rather be educating people at a bigger scale. So what's coming to mind for you, Allison? Do you think you have the tip of this, an idea of what this might be for you?
Well, I've had a mission phrase for a long time now, which is, I want to facilitate the experience of joy and enlightenment. In 15 years, I have not come up with a better word than facilitate, but I want to facilitate the experience of joy and enlightenment. So whatever I'm doing, does it make people happy? Does it make them smarter? Okay, that's what I want to be doing. And I feel like your QBR here has more specific language about what you're actually going to do, rather than the philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I want to help people write better books and finish the books they're writing.
Okay, that's a good start.
Yeah. Because it gets a little bit depressing when I get to the stage of, I have to tell people this is not going to be commercially successful, and that's not the part I love the most. But it's nice if I can help people go, okay, I'm writing better. I have finished my book. This is not going to be a commercial publishing deal, but I know how to reach this community that this book is really going to be enjoyed by, or is going to help them. And so that's some of it too, is, helping people figure out, well, where does this book belong?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to help people write better, finish their book, and get their book to the people who need to read it.
Yes. Good. That has a lot of specificity. That's valuable. Okay. So the next step, and obviously you may be refining that over time. The next is the hardest lesson I had to learn. I'm going to illustrate it with a little story that Allison might appreciate. Have you been to Japan, Allison?
Never, but it's on my list. I've done so much research about it.
Okay, so I've been to Tokyo. I haven't been to this particular shop. It's called Turret, and it's Turret Latte has possibly the best latte in the world. They have this little sign on the door called Rule of the One Drink. So the goal for Turret is to be the best, not the biggest. They could easily expand to multiple locations throughout the city of Tokyo, but they choose to remain small and take the time to make this one latte at a time. And that's their rule of the one drink. Early in my freelance life, I was all about diversification, lots of different income streams. And I think to a certain extent, this makes a lot of sense for writers and people in the writing community, because often book sales is not like, it's just not going to keep you afloat. You have to look at other things and protect yourself. But as you become more successful, this starts to work to your detriment, is what I discovered. And so there's a cost to having more services, doing more projects, having more offerings, because it takes focus away from what is most important in serving your vision. And I don't have to say, there's this gravitational pull to constantly do more and more. And it's exciting to do new things and launch new things. I think incremental improvement looks very boring, and we tend not to go the Turret route of just perfecting that one thing, that one drink, or that one thing that you offer. But what I have found, and this is after starting to winnow my offerings over about 18 months, I would lop one off, then I'd lop off another, and then another, just waiting for the miraculous new time to appear. And, a lot of it was about, it freed up my energy to do the things I really cared about even better than before. One of the first things I cut off was university teaching, because that just it was easy to cut, easy. And then I started cutting manuscript editing, and then I started cutting the query and synopsis editing. Then I cut the consulting, and then I cut the book proposal editing, which I liked the most. That one was really hard to give up, but I do think I can return to it as part of classes or courses or things that I offer, which I am still doing. So to be clear, the two things I'm focused on now are online education, which includes webinars like this, and then a paid newsletter. That's it. That's all I do. No more. Just two income streams, aside from, money I might get paid teaching at conferences or something. So my message here is that focus is leverage, and it also improves your life. So it makes you better at business, and it takes off some of this pressure. I think some of you may know Marie Forleo. She's such a big name in like business coaching, small business coaching, especially for women. I actually haven't taken her class. It's business. I can't think of the name, business school. Someone in the chat will get it right. But B School. Okay, thank you. In this Clockwork book, she's interviewed saying, it's so much more fulfilling to have less things you focus on and do really, really well. And it puts you way ahead of the competition. And then there's another guy, a dude who says focus has compound interest. Entrepreneurs try to serve everyone and do everything. They never master anything. I would take issue with that, but I know my customers so well that I can move 1,000,000 times faster. I don't think competition is necessarily an issue for us, but certainly it doesn't hurt to be in a position that is essentially unassailable by other factors, by new people entering the market. So in any event, there's a lot of cost as you complicate the business and have these different revenue streams. And the more you do, the more chaotic the environment tends to become. So I'm going to pause there and just let you react or say I'm wrong.
No, I get excited about new ideas. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I was the kid who started the neighborhood newsletter. I've always been a person who's into, let me start this cool new thing. And I think maybe I would be better served by focusing a little bit more on the parts of my job that I really like and going, okay, what could be even better about this? What could be the cool new thing within what I'm already doing that does not require marketing to a new population, that does not require setting up a new workflow process? Yeah, so I think that's kind of how I'm receiving that.
Okay. Now, here is something I think is a pretty, like, now we're on to kind of like the third stage of this. I think in a really important decision that I already made my peace with my decision quite some time ago. Do you want a business that dies with you, or do you want a business that's designed to outlive you? So go
It's
ahead.
so interesting that you ask this question right now, because I have a friend who is interested in building a literary consultancy business, which is a thing that's more common in Britain than it is in America. But it's basically, there's editing, there's shepherding people through the querying process, there's shepherding people through the publication process. And part of why the interest is there is because she's interested in building something that later can be sold. That would be a licensed business with a formal corporate structure and would be sold. I think I'm actually okay with a business that dies with me, because I built this really, really nice business called the Aerial Angels that was a circus company. I had basically, 4 different teams of people who could do the show in various combinations, who were all working at the same time. And I thought, oh, someone will take this on. And I did pass it on to a specific person who I thought was, qualified to do something with it. And, for one reason or another, it just kind of died. And I was not as sad about that as I thought I would be. It was okay that it was just, a thing.
Yeah.
I feel like what I offer is so specific. It's not just that, okay, I edit your manuscript. It's that I edit your manuscript and I make you feel really excited about getting back to work on it. And I think that's a much rarer combination of skills than I edit your manuscript and do a really great job, which, I think a lot of people can do. And I love the live teaching thing because it lets my work reach more people. Like I once had a student who said, oh, well, I want to be a rock star. And somebody else said, well, why rock star? Why not just, I want to be a singer. I'm a good singer. And he's like, because rock star is the career path where the maximum number of people can experience what I have to share. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like I'd like to keep reaching out to more people, which is why I published a book, but I don't want to lose that element of that hands-on with the clients, because that energy feeds me. It really feels good to get off a call and be like, oh, so-and-so just came up with a great new idea for their book and they're going to, head in this direction, or, we solved this plot problem, or we figured out how they're going to tell their parents they wrote about this memoir. And so I think I'm good with it dying with me, because I kind of feel like my business is me, which is one of the challenges with delegating work.
Right.
Does that make sense? Does that seem like a dumb choice?
No, not at all. I mean, my choice is to have the business die with me. I've even told Mark, keep the site up for a limited time and then shut it all down. Wow. Whatever materials I have, they can be gifted, maybe to the Authors Guild or something, to the extent they will have some utility, but otherwise it's over. Like, this was only, was only meant to be me. And I'm not actually interested in building an organization. I just zero interest, don't want to do it. There's a really great book by Paul Jarvis. I might get the title wrong, but it's essentially the philosophy of a company of one. So that might be, I haven't read the book, but that might be something for those of you who think you'll just be a company of one to look at. He talks about, the pressure to grow bigger than maybe you want to. And, he's giving you permission to keep things small, but also make as much money as you want, essentially, and how that works. But I know like people like Mary Cole, who's a former literary agent, is building something called the Good Story Company. You've got Jenny Nash doing Author Accelerator. I look at those companies and they're impressive. And I'm like, if I tried to do that, I would be miserable. I just don't want to manage a company. So I think it's
I
important to
don't want
figure
to
out.
spend my time doing paperwork. I like the teaching part. I like the editing part. I would like to do as little paperwork as possible. And making a company that passes on to other people means you have to design workflows. You have to train people how to do it. And none of that is the stuff I enjoy doing.
Yep. Yep. So Clockwork, I think, as the book, like in the second half, especially as the book continues, a lot of its assumption is you're probably going to be designing a business that continues after you. And so its utility starts to drop off. But I still think the first half is really valuable for figuring out what you're going to let go of. So if you're a company of one, the things you likely want to keep are, the thing that ties into your QBR, the work that moves you, that keeps you alive, the reason you get up in the morning. And then also you do have to keep some marketing piece, like the lead generation. So for you, that might be like Writer's Bridge. But there is a point at which you have all of the leads you need. Like there's no reason to accumulate more leads so assiduously when you're overwhelmed. And this also can be a hard lesson to learn. So like social media, for instance, dumping a lot of time into that when you're overworked is kind of can be counterproductive.
I have started to be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to post to Instagram once a week. It's just not going to happen for me. I'm going to post every so often. And when I do, what I'm going to say is going to be meaningful enough that people will be, oh, yay, Allison posted again, instead of, oh God, not another Instagram post from Allison. I'd rather like wait a month and write a long caption that has something meaningful, like I did yesterday, talking about what we were doing today, rather than try to post every single day. And I don't want to demand people's attention on a daily basis. I want their attention because I either have something beautiful that is going to make them feel something in their heart, or I have something incredibly useful that is going to make them excited about their work, which is kind of where Writer's Bridge fits in for me. Yeah. And I also see Writer's Bridge and the Brevity blog, both of which I do for free. They are lead generators, but I also think that they are ways that I publicly assert my expertise in my field. They're ways that I say, hey, I have the right to say, this is what I believe, and you should believe what I say. And I also feel like I've been a very lucky person. I've been a very hardworking, lucky person, but I've been a very lucky person. I have a lot of great stuff in my life. And I really like being able to give back on that scale. And just like with you, both of those work for me because they're not so one-on-one. Like there's opportunities to respond to people in the comments, to talk to people in chat. A lot of times after we finish a Writer's Bridge, a couple of people will hang out because they have a specific question, but I'm reaching 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 people at once and still making it feel like an intimate experience. And I really value that.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing food for thought I'll give you is, this has been many years ago now, about 10 years ago. I made my platform in the early days by being the figurehead at Writer's Digest. And even when I left, I was still really actively involved and wrote the popular blog, the editor's blog, There Are No Rules. And eventually I realized if I was ever going to kind of take wing, I had to stop doing it for free. I had to stop doing this Writer's Digest blog. But I was really conflicted about it because my identity was wrapped up in being with Writer's Digest. And I felt like I would lose my credibility overnight if I didn't have the Writer's Digest brand attached to me. Of course, it did not. Like I'm fine without Writer's Digest blogging for them. Obviously I teach for them and there's still this loose connection, but Jane Friedman did fine without that brand. So I'm not saying this is an argument for leaving any of the things that you're doing, but I think sometimes we don't have the confidence or we think that we're not going to have the credibility when we've already attained the credibility by being ourselves, and we don't need this external thing attached to us.
Yeah, I think I feel like it helps keep me in front of people in a way that is not as much labor as doing a newsletter myself, because I've got 2,500 names on my mailing list, which I know is a drop in the bucket relative to you, Jane, but which for your average writer or editor is an extremely large number. And, they're all people who specifically would like to hear from me. And when I send out a newsletter, which happens maybe 3 times a year, people are really excited to get it. I love writing it because it's always something that's personally meaningful. And yet there's something in me that's like, maybe I should do this every month. Nah, it's just not going to happen every month. So I almost feel like it's easier to do the brevity blog than it is to send out my own stuff, because I work better on somebody else's deadline. That's how I wrote a book 10 pages at a time, because it was due at writing group on Saturday morning. So you better turn up with some freaking pages. I am really crappy at setting deadlines for myself. Really, really crappy. I will always renegotiate my own deadline. But if public failure is the penalty for missing the deadline, I will get that shit done. And it's weird that I kind of have to threaten myself with public failure for things, but it's kind of a circus training thing too. If you want to get good at a trick, you put it in a show, because the impetus to get it done when you're doing it publicly gives you that extra little boost to actually do it and get it done.
If you told your community that you were committing to sending out your email newsletter at some frequency, would that be enough of a public failure if you didn't do it?
I don't think so, because I've tried doing that before, and it's kind of like, that is kind of at war with the who really wants to hear from me? Like the little failure monster that's in here. Because we all have the "you're great" monster and the "you suck" monster. And the "you're great" monster is constantly in our ear. You're amazing. Nobody understands how incredible you are. You are the backbone of this organization, and nobody appreciates you. And then "you suck." If everybody found out how much you suck, they wouldn't like you anymore, because secretly you suck. You're just doing a really good job of hiding it. No, you're great. You're great. And it's that constant thing. So I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but I know I could do a great big impressive move in front of an audience that I could not necessarily do by myself in the gym.
Okay. Well, this could be challenging, because I have some recommendations that are going to push against this tendency. So I'll table that for the moment.
Well, I want to hear something different. If the same thing was working all the time, I wouldn't necessarily be here spilling my soul to, 85 of my dearest friends.
Right. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
Let me wrap up kind of this third stage, which is about focus and thinking about what you can let go of. And everyone, I think, has heard of the 80-20 rule, which is 20% of your effort generally results in 80% of your results. Often businesses, it's a small portion of their client base or business that's driving a lot of the profit. And I think a more useful way of looking at it, if you're an individual offering stuff, especially if you're a writer, is thinking about $1,000 per hour work versus $10 per hour work. Allison, this is where you have a huge problem after seeing what you do. So I'm just putting up some I have no idea if this is how your time breaks down. I'm just it's a theoretical. But let's say in the course of a week, you put in 40 hours, it's probably more than that. And you're doing 10% of your time is $1,000 per hour work. I imagine that might be something like a webinar for you, maybe. And then 50% of your time is $10 per hour work. Let's say that's moving data from Excel into some other system. Just really barely worth the time involved. Although I'm overstating the case. So if we were to do that at 40 hours a week, this is rough. I didn't get out.
No, but your point is really excellent, because the number one most profitable thing I do on a per hour ratio is write plays for the high school theater market. And you write the play once and then you make money forever. That I never have to work on again. The second most profitable thing I do is teach webinars for you, in terms of the amount of money in relative to the hours out. And I know that the audience sees the hour that you and I are online. I usually spend anywhere between 10 and 20 hours preparing slides, and I spend another 1 to 3 hours answering follow-up questions and responding to further questions on social media. But I love every minute of it. And actually, I find making PowerPoint slides to be soothing. Like if I'm having a really rough day, I'll sit down and make some PowerPoint slides because there's always something that needs slides coming up. And those things are really high dollar per hour ratios. The stuff that is much lower is the business maintenance stuff, some of which I either need to delegate or I need to figure out a better process. Yeah.
Right.
And I think I'm not charging enough for consulting too. I've been scared to raise my rate because I worry that people will go, well, you're not worth that. Even though I preach to other people, just let your clients say no to themselves if they can't afford you.
Yes, absolutely. I think there is totally room to raise your rates, although there is a diabolical problem that ensues, which we will get to. The point I want to make here is that the 1K per hour tasks rarely pay off immediately, which you alluded to with the writing the plays. You write it once and then that's going to pay off over months and years into the future. It's the same with books. You rarely see the payoff as you're writing the book. It comes through sales over a very long period of time. Now, I know I'm stating the obvious, but human nature is to treat all of these tasks as equal contributors to the bottom line when they are not. So
Jane, if I was able to take unpaid time and say to myself, okay, Allison, this week you are going to write a play. It takes me a total of about 40 hours to write a 30-minute play. That's like first draft, middle draft, later draft, get somebody to read it, send it to my publisher, incorporate her edits. If I currently have like 6 plays in the market. If I had another 10 plays in the market, I would never have to work another day in my life and everything would be voluntary, because the high school market is this weird secret market that is incredibly profitable. And yet there is part of me that's like, oh, no, it would be silly to check into a hotel and write a play this week, even though that could be my retirement plan.
Yeah.
Why, Jane? Why am I like this?
I mean, I don't think it's silly not to do it. It just depends on it. Does that fulfill the QBR, or, there are lots of considerations. Just because something makes money for me isn't sufficient to do it.
Yeah.
But in the right-hand column here, I have suggested, even if you could just move 20% of your activity to a higher earning hourly category, it makes an enormous difference in your earnings. So I think the essential message here is the more you say no to the things that don't really matter, whether it's admin work or tasks that, just, I don't know, it's probably the 15 minutes you spend on the client who sent you something, like it's taking your focus and energy away from something else. It's not that you shouldn't help the client, but it's hugely diminishing returns with that sort of work.
And I think it would really serve me if I sat down and I kept this year in particular, I really wanted to see how I was spending my time. And I used a timekeeper app and I stopwatched just about everything I do, including running errands, commuting to meet my writer buddy, all this kind of stuff. And I think if I sat down and factored out, this is how much I'm making doing each of these kind of jobs per hour, that would really help me go, okay, do I love this thing enough to keep doing it at $10 an hour? Or do I need to swap this out or change the nature of the job in some way? Or what am I getting out of it? Or what penalty do I fear if I don't do it? And I actually have a really nice Excel sheet that I started at the beginning of the year that I input my time and the money I made doing it, and it spits out, this is how much you made an hour. I have been too busy to update that sheet since about the middle of September.
Okay. Well, I
think it's probably worth it for me to take some time, because now I know what I want to do with the sheet. Before it was just like, okay, this will give me information, but I didn't know what to do with the information. And this is so helpful.
Good. This exercise is, I think it does light a fire. I think it lights a fire. And I just want to be clear, it's not to earn more money. It's to do the same amount of work, keep the same hours, or reduce your hours in order to make the same amount or more. And as soon as I started taking away work, I was worried. I was preparing myself for an income decline. But again, counterintuitively, my income has jumped every single time I have taken something away. So you have to participate in that mind hack where if you're worried about declining income, you have to say it's only temporary. If I do fall off a cliff, I can always bring this work back later, but I'm pretty sure you will not bring it back whatever you drop, because your income will go up and your hours will either stay the same or go down. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And something else that I really value. So like the last retreat I led in Italy, it was a really awesome retreat. Loved it. Great people. I felt like I was not as emotionally present as I could have been for the writers. I felt like I needed to be there more for them because there were other tasks that I needed to complete that normally I would have tried to not have to address any of them during that week of the retreat. And I felt a little like, oh, I wish I could have made this, I mean, everybody had a great time and most of them made major progress on their books, but there was still part of me that was like, no, I would actually like to give them more by not having this other stuff on my mind at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us to a question that I know has been on your mind, which is, should you be raising your prices? And I think it's really important, yes, there's no question in my mind. Yes, you should charge more for editing and consulting or the hourly, all of it. Yes, a million times. Yes. However, I found that when I did that myself, the work did not decrease. In fact, again, paradoxically, it increased and the pressure increased.
People think that stuff that costs more is worth more. And I feel like, oh, I'm charging you so much money, I'd better be worth it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I feel like publishing a book gives me permission to raise my prices, even though I don't need anybody's permission. I'm hoping that it will help. I'm hoping that it will help me not take on too much because I won't increase my number of available hours in my booking system. Because the booking system is like maximum 3 appointments per day. I only take appointments 3 days a week. I only take them during certain hours. And if I can keep that number limited, but raise the price, except then I feel guilty and bad for doing that to my previous clients. How dare I take advantage of people who are all clearly me, broken 25 years old? How dare I do that to them?
Well, there was a recent Authors Guild session about pricing and negotiation that had some really wonderful, basically grab bags of sentences and statements and things to say in exactly these situations. I don't know that I'm going to remember them exactly, but it's available on the Authors Guild YouTube channel.
Well, my massage therapist once sent me a letter that said, hey, I have this new certification. I am now charging this other rate. Yes. And something that I told other editors in the webinar that we led was, hey, say to your, set the price for your new clients, say to your existing clients, my price has gone up. You're going to get this slightly discounted rate, or, something like that, where you're kind of grandfathering them in and bringing them forward. I think it's just a case then of all right, if I want to do that, how do I set up separate links in Acuity so that there's some people who get, this and some people who get that? Because I don't think there's anything inherently unfair about charging different prices to different people.
No, I don't think so either. And I think it is possible to increase rates on existing clients, assuming you're not in the middle of a job and, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't raise it in the middle. So,
yeah. And I find that people tend to be super respectful and they get it. They're hiring you because something attracted them to you and they want your work and they value it. So usually people are not fussy, and those who are actually assholes.
And they're not my clients. Not everybody's going to be my client, and that's okay. And I think that's the thing too. I do really try to be value focused in what I offer. And so I know that anybody who walks out of a meeting with me is either going to be closer to finishing their book, closer to selling their book, or they are going to make more money doing what they're doing. Ideally, you have a meeting with me and you immediately go out and either get a new client or raise your price or figure out the audience for your book or whatever. And I think the other thing there is that it's, oh crud, and then it ran out of my head before I finished the sentence.
It's okay.
I'll see if it comes back to me.
I bet.
But yeah. Oh, and no, it's gone. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So getting down to brass tacks, in the list that you sent to me of all the things you do, the stuff that really jumped out was the developmental editing you can't keep up with and the related admin related to that. Just the tons of available services. Like if I think everyone here should go to Allison's website, click on the Acuity booking link and look at the very long list of things that you offer. It's like a smorgasbord.
And it's too many choices for clients. Like it gets overwhelming for the client to choose.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could make your life so much easier by dropping the bulk of it and deciding this is where I'm going to focus my energy on these one or two services. The other thing that jumped out was the retreats and events that are time intensive and low profit. Now, as someone who hates to put on in real person events, I don't have easy solutions here, but there's a really great story in Clockwork about a person dealing, like two stories about businesses or individuals dealing with in real life events and how to pull them off while not being overwhelmed. And I think you'll find those really useful.
I'd like to look at that because that's actually one of the things I want to cling to the most, because I love doing that in-person work and I love traveling, but I would like it to be a little less time intensive and a little higher profit. And I realized the thing I forgot, which is I don't have to feel guilty about raising my rates because I do plenty of stuff where I dish out excellent, actionable advice for free that anyone can come to. It stays on the internet practically forever. I don't have to feel guilty about, sorry, some people can't afford me, because if they want to take the time to comb through what I've already done, the advice is pretty much there.
Yep. Yep. Good. And then the last bit, the heavy, I mean, I don't know for sure how much time you're spending on social media, but to me, like my gut feeling is that it's a lot of time that probably doesn't need to be spent aside from the things that are just part of good business practice, like after the webinar, being on Twitter and et cetera, et cetera. So I think your impulse to say, I don't have to post on Instagram at this rate, or I can pull back. Yes, two thumbs up. You have arrived. I think you can use it to the extent that you have the time or inclination to use it.
Yeah. And I like the interaction with strangers, I think, because I like hearing from people who are outside my normal orbit and I get to learn new things. What I should probably do is I should take a closer look at maybe timing my social media use more regularly, because I tend to be, I'm a toilet Twitterer, I admit it. But I'm also a waiting room Twitterer. I'm a standing in the customs line for a while Twitterer. And so it is something that I fill a lot of my empty, I couldn't do anything else in this time. It's a waiting time activity a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I like doing the Instagram because it keeps me connected to my writing self, because I try to write something that's like a miniature essay and not just, oh, hey, here's this caption. I guess too, I feel like I want to announce what I'm selling on social media, and I feel like it's shitty to only sell stuff. I want to make sure that I'm an interesting enough presence there that people aren't like, oh, Allison's doing another fucking webinar, Can I curse in your webinar, Jane?
Yes, you can. So I know you said your email newsletter list is a drop in the bucket compared to mine. However, you have a really great open rate, super engagement. And for me, email newsletter is like the ticket out of some amount of overwhelm and overwork. And it also reduces your dependency on social media to sell. Not that you shouldn't use social media in that way, but can we take that impulse you have to exercise your creative writing muscles on Instagram and put it into your newsletter that comes out every, 2 weeks, at least every month?
I could probably handle once a month.
To me, it is like, it's business security. It is the most valuable thing in your sales and marketing arsenal. So I think it is likely underutilized. Of all the assets you have, the most underutilized tool. Okay, I'll get off that
I'm making a note. No, I'm making a note. I think, no, and I think that would be a good thing too, because the newsletters really are creative writing for me as well. Like it's usually a travel story or a personal story of some kind. Like my most recent one was my 10-year visa in Dubai finally came through, and I had been originally told it would be an extremely easy and free process. And it ended up taking 4 months, 14 visits to government offices and costing like almost $3,000. But then when it came, it said writer on it instead of housewife, because like normally non-working spouses get a visa that says housewife, not even spouse, not even non-working, but housewife. And having writer on there was so meaningful, and people really loved that newsletter a lot. Like, even though I was kind of worried about sending out, something like that, because I didn't know if people would relate, but they really did. So that was,
More of that. Yes. More.
Okay. And that's something too, that's the kind of writing that I do on Instagram as well, where, I try to also have a takeaway for people who aren't writers, because there are people on my list who just like me for, I don't know, whatever reason, So, but it's a nice way to share like the travel stories and kind of stay connected. Okay. So I need to figure out some kind of external deadline then that's going to help me do a newsletter once a month.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever will make it happen.
Okay.
All right. So there's a second part to what jumps out at me here that's more granular. You described a process of handling website entries, like some people signing up for something, it's in some sort of file, and then you're like manually putting it into another system, maybe email capture of some sort. You're also using very unusual website building tools, at least from my perspective as an individual writer. Like you mentioned, Bootstrap.
They're not what anybody else uses.
Yeah.
I'm like hand coding HTML on a lot of my website stuff. And mostly it's because my husband does about half the labor on that. And that's what he works in.
Okay.
So I can do it a lot faster than when we first started it, but I did go ahead and sign up for Flowdesk. And I think I'm going to try sending my next newsletter in Flowdesk, because I hear it's actually like fun and easy and pretty in a way that like, it took me 2 hours to figure out how to send a newsletter in Joomla. And I know that if I do it again, I am going to have to like completely learn it again, because I have forgotten it's been so long. But I did go to the trouble of importing my mailing list into there. So maybe I'll see if I can export it and put it in Flowdesk.
So these two items together, to me, okay, let me pause for a second. I never suggest changing tools lightly. And I'm not saying you need to go out and do this right away, or that it's your top priority, because there is so much time and frustration involved in changing a system like this. That said, I think there are some really significant benefits you would gain from thinking through what new tool to use that would integrate your website, your e-commerce, which means anything that you're selling online, period, and email newsletter. And then like if in the future, if you're marketing membership or you're doing other things, other models, a platform that can easily extend or grow with your business, whatever direction you take it in. Joomla is for me like what universities with the IT departments use. I wouldn't even know where to begin with Bootstrap. Although the fact that your husband can help you with that is okay. Like I understand that, but I'm also concerned that I don't know enough about it. But like with WordPress, with some other tools, which I'll suggest in a second, all of the solutions you need are already out there. And you just add them, and often they're free.
Yeah. The Bootstrap is working well for me. Like I can put together a really beautiful website that doesn't look like anybody else's website in like a week. It's probably 15, 20 hours of coding if I'm doing something, basically from scratch. But the Joomla thing, it's complicated and it's not fun. Like from everybody I know who's using Flowdesk, which integrates with WordPress, integrates with a bunch of other stuff, integrates with Acuity, integrates with Squarespace. They're all like, oh, it's so fun. I actually enjoy writing my newsletter now. And so I'm wondering if that might be a good solution. I was writing them in tiny letter, except there's like almost no tracking, and all I get is people's emails and no other information for them and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into the technical weeds here, and also we could discuss it like in some other fashion. But mainly, if you have the right website platform and tools that are feeding into it and out of it, all of the stuff that you're doing manually becomes automatic. So I don't spend any time building my site or transferring data, or like, it doesn't even occur to me that there's admin tasks related to all of the things you're discussing. It's just because these solutions are so ubiquitous and because everything syncs with each other, it's just working in the background 24/7, and I never have to collect data or think about moving it around.
Yeah.
So that's my concern for you, that if you're using tools that are a little bit unusual or developer oriented, like for your husband, they're not working at your level and helping you implement solutions in like 30 minutes rather than 15 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned using Things 3. Which I haven't used it myself, but it seems like it doesn't have collaboration. Like you can't, like if you wanted to use things to help track event or retreat stuff and collaborate with team members or assistants, would that be possible?
I don't think so. I think it's a one-man operation. I've started trying to learn to use Notion, which does collaborate, and I've watched your Sunday business sermon on how you use Notion a couple of times, and I'm probably going to watch it again. And I'm starting with that in terms of my husband and I have like a future project that needs photos and links and information and to-dos all in one place. And Notion seems really suited for that. So hopefully by the time I've figured out what I can delegate, I would be able to do it by signing somebody into Notion.
Okay. Yeah, Notion was where I was heading next with that, since it's very good for project management and team use.
And it's pretty, like it's rewarding to work on something that is attractive to look at.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're using Excel for finances. Does that extend to all sorts of accounting, like anything related to tracking money? Okay.
I track my receipts in there. There's got to be some kind of easier system, because I'm like, once a month I sit down with a movie and I enter all my receipts one by one. There's got to be a better way.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. And I'm in a unique position that a lot of people are not in, which is also that now that I live overseas, I may no longer need to keep that habit of tracking receipts, because Dubai has no income tax, and I sometimes come under the foreign earned income exclusion. So I may not need to keep filing Schedule C.
Okay.
Yeah.
My suggestion here would be, if you want a free tool to try out, I use Wave Accounting, and it helps you track receipts. You can send invoices.
Okay.
Now, I can't, since I'm in the US and I think it's a US based tool, I don't know if there might be some implications for people working outside of the US environment, but I would imagine something like QuickBooks or FreshBooks would do just as well. But Wave, it syncs up all the bank accounts. It has receipt logging. I remember doing it in Excel, and to me, you can't even compare the two, and it will generate all the reports you want about where the money's coming from, how earnings are increasing or decreasing. It's basically like having a CFO. So I would really recommend, if you want to get away from that manual labor.
Okay. Yeah, because it's a time consuming thing that's not particularly fun to do. So I think that would be a really great thing to do. I'll check out Wave, I'll check out QuickBooks, I'll check out FreshBooks, and then I'll make a choice.
Yeah. And then the last thing I've noticed is that you use Acuity to basically power all of your e-commerce, I think. Or you might invoice out of PayPal on occasion or something like that. But I think Acuity has, as much as I love it and use it, it has limitations, especially as far as like storing data and being able to move that data around. And I'm just concerned for you generally relying on Acuity.
I think the weirdest thing for me about using Acuity is because my business is international, they can either pay me through Acuity with PayPal, or they get instructions on how to pay me in a bank account in various countries.
Okay.
Yeah, because like the people in the United Arab Emirates, people there do bank transfers for everything. Like a bank transfer is not a big deal there, the way it's a big deal in the States. Canada has a system where it's incredibly easy to transfer money from one person's bank account to another just using their email or their phone number. The US now has Zelle and Venmo. So that's the other reason that I use the Excel sheet, because I can't necessarily enter everything into Acuity. Like I don't handle billing for full manuscript edits through Acuity. But it's been really easy and pleasant to be able to say, okay, there are 35 spaces available for the retreat in January, and Acuity will stop selling it when it hits that number. And then I can export everybody's registration information into one sheet that I can then Google Sheet it and share it with my co-teacher.
Okay.
So I guess that's where it's serving me. It's definitely a huge, I started using it this past year, and it has been a huge step up from what I did before, which was Excel sheets and scribbled pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Sometimes people mail checks to my mom and she deposits them for me.
Okay. Well,
I feel like an Oompa Loompa, Jane. I feel like a little, like, you know, here I am, I'm working away in the chocolate factory. It's all going to be fine. We'll just sing another weird song.
So, you know, I might not have a great solution given some of the special considerations you have, but I can at least describe to you what might be possible. I think the key here is you want to limit the number of exceptions that occur in the system. That any sort of manual, here's how you have to pay, instructions or payments that come outside of the system you've set up. And sometimes that does mean telling people, I can't work with you unless you can do X or Y. Like I don't accept check, just not going to do it. It's just, it's not worth it. You know, everyone has to make their own decisions, but and I think with checks, it's mostly that there are people who are the right demographic for writing retreats, who are also of a demographic where they are more comfortable with paper checks. And if they're writing me a check for a couple $1,000s, it's worth it for the hassle. But yeah, I don't take checks for like consulting or anything like that. Only for great big huge ticket items where people are like, oh, it's going to save me a substantial amount in credit card fees if I pay you by check. Right.
So,
Understood. Yeah. Okay. So just to give you a sense of how my system here is streamlined, I use WordPress, which basically takes care of 90% of all of the issues you described, because WordPress integrates with everything. So I use Gravity Forms to collect registrations or materials or manuscript. It doesn't matter. Gravity Forms can be used to charge for virtually anything you want. There can be limitations on how many people can buy a thing. It's endlessly customizable. Unfortunately, it only works with WordPress. There's probably a comparable tool out there, I would hope, that works with something like Bootstrap. But Gravity Forms is just rock solid, dependable. And you can integrate myriad payment forms with it. PayPal, Square, Stripe, stuff that I haven't even heard of. So it's just kind of one of the industry standards. And so I would, you know, I wouldn't consider it a booking tool. Like I would still be using Acuity for things like booking your time on a calendar. But for anything else that's not about booking your time on a calendar, I use Gravity Forms. And then it's also hooked up with Zapier, which is this thing that helps the form communicate with everything else. So for example, and if you saw my webinars, you know about this, my Sunday business sermons, you know, if someone registers for a webinar through my site that's handled through a Gravity form, it immediately puts them in the webinar automatically because of a Zapier link. It immediately adds them to my email newsletter list because of a Zapier or Active Campaign link. They have, and you know, Gravity Forms links with Active Campaign, with MailChimp, probably with Tiny Letter, like all of the major email marketing services. So I never have to think about, if I have a webinar registrant, Do I have them tracked in all the places? They're automatically tracked. And then it's automatically hits Wave, the accounting system, because, all of the payment accounts go right into Wave. So it's one and done, nothing else needs to happen.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a really helpful thing to have, because that's the back end stuff that I don't really enjoy doing. And yet I don't really want to delegate a virtual assistant to work with my bank account.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Very understandable. So that's why I advocate for WordPress, because of that. Administrative work is over. It just works.
Okay.
The other possible solution here is Ghost, a very popular alternative right now. Have you heard of it?
I have not. What is it?
So it's another content management system, meaning it's similar to WordPress and what it can do. It's probably its killer feature or functionality, which WordPress does not have natively, is the ability to have recurring subscriptions or memberships and to send out an email newsletter through it. So you don't have a separate email newsletter system. It's baked into Ghost. It also has all the e-commerce stuff baked into it. So it's essentially like getting the WordPress e-commerce power in one place, plus subscription, membership, and email newsletter.
Okay.
Very user-friendly. Yeah, so that's the other one to consider.
I will check it out, because sometimes when I'm lying awake at night, I like to look on my phone, and checking out new apps is one of the things I can do that's not looking at email.
Then there's also, in a pinch, like if you started a new event or you did this pop-up thing you're going to charge for, Card is actually a pretty powerful website builder that you can integrate payments into. So for what that's worth, if you don't want to spend time in Bootstrap, you could use Card. And I make this suggestion mainly for all the people listening who probably can't do what you do and don't want to touch WordPress with a 10-foot pole. Look at Card. It's free to start, and then you pay like $12 a year to be able to take payments, which is the best deal you will ever find anywhere. And then I've already mentioned Wave. All right.
Awesome.
All right. So I know we've been at this for a while. I will kind of make a few last points, and then we can open up to questions, your questions, people's questions who are still here. The Clockwork book, it talks a lot about hiring and delegating. And I think what it does so well is explain why we end up hiring or delegating and then end up with less time than ever, even though we've hired someone. So it's what you described, Allison, where this person didn't do it right the first time. You end up taking it back. You're the only one who knows how to do it right or perfectly. I have been through this cycle so many times. And then I hired the person I married, and I couldn't fire him. Not that he was doing a bad job, but we had to work through our issues, basically. The book basically says when you hire or delegate, a lot of the problems that end up occurring when you end up doing all of this extra work to manage the people is that you are fielding all of their questions all the time and performing that very special, important person role. And you only know how to do it right. And you have to be there for them to ensure that they do it right. He talks about how to break out of that cycle. It's really helpful. If you do want, I do think there's a number of things that are happening here, especially on the retreat side, where I think the only solution is to hire an assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did take one step towards that. There was an attendee in Italy who was like, I would love to help sometime. And she's also a professional event planner. So it's like, okay, I know we're already on the same wavelength. So I need to schedule a call with her to talk about what that help might look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because even just having somebody who can run up the hill and tell the restaurant owner that we're going to be 12 people instead of 10 people tonight would be incredibly useful in terms of, I don't need to be the gopher. I don't need to pick people up from the airport. And yes, I value the time I have in the car with people as like, oh, I'm getting to talk to you about your project more. I can sit down and have coffee with them. And then I don't have to do it while I'm driving to and fro.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that can be done there. It's about probably creating the time to do it, to extract yourself. Okay. So I think your marching orders coming out of here is to, I would say immediately drop certain types of work to the extent you can, and to stop doing the inexpensive work as the queen bee. As quickly as it can happen. It's just like you're lighting money on fire. That's the analogy here. You want to pass off any kind of data entry if you can. I do suggest if you want to have someone help you with the social media graphics or social media creation, drafting and scheduling, by all means do that. That seems like really quick things that you could do, but I think the bigger impact is going to come from looking at that acuity list and saying, how can I get this all into basically a small square and going from there.
And I finally figured out, I'm trying a thing called Social Bee right now, that it recycles your posts on like a long-term basis, like, oh, here are 3 quotes from this blog post that I will send out in 6 months. And I really like having that kind of, there's a basis of scheduled social media, and then I can interact live when I have time, so that I'm still providing that information. I'm still providing that presence that is useful and not selling, but I don't have to be on there myself just to maintain a presence, which I think would be good. Yeah. And there's probably somebody who can do a better job than me at graphics, because right now I make them in PowerPoint.
I think you could find someone. I think you could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll end with one of my favorite quotes from Alan Watts, which is, the nice thing about hitting yourself with a hammer is that it feels so good when you stop. And I can attest to this. When I recently went away on Thanksgiving for 5 or 6 days, and I did not have the email anxiety, and it was glorious. It truly was. So I hope that we can get you to that point sooner rather than later.
I think we can, because I took the entire month of July off this year. The problem that I faced was when I came back, I had a mountain of work that had not been done, but it was really good to not be constantly responsive to my inbox. So I think I'd like to figure it out, so that I want to take July off again next year. It's a slow month for me anyway, but I want to have enough automatic processes set up so that when I come back, I'm not stepping into a morass of undone work.
Yes.
Yeah. This is so helpful. And I thought I was going to cry, but I didn't. So I'm really happy about that.
Oh, good. So we've now gone for like an hour and a half, but I blocked off 2 hours for this. In fact, I'm happy to, and I bet Allison is too, happy to take questions or discuss anything that you just want to hear us bat back and forth. I see Natasha's asking, what is the app that Allison said can regenerate content? What was that? Social Bee?
Social Bee. And what it does is you enter your content. So let's say I take a brevity blog post, I pull 4 quotes I really like, and I put them into the schedule. And then Social Bee will end up recycling those much later, so that I have this constant library of content. Because, when you put something on Twitter, most of your audience isn't going to see it. So they're not going to care if you repeat it in 6 months.
And I just see you answered it in the chat. So thank you for answering it again.
Sure.
Melissa says, what is the ratio of marketing to office to client work that is sustainable? Meaning, how much time is ideal to spend in marketing tasks, office work, and billable hours? In my last business, it took a long time to onboard clients because each client was a large job.
That's a really good question. It does not take me long to onboard clients, because one of the advantages of being so present on social media is that anybody who signs up with me knows what they're getting. It's like, here is the contract. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how much it's going to cost. If you have a problem with any of that, I am not the editor for you. Let me dive fully and wholeheartedly into your work, or please go with God and be with somebody else. So and that's where Acuity really helped me, is I no longer go back and forth about when are we going to meet. I no longer go back and forth about how much are we going to pay. It's like, here's the price, here's what I do, book it or don't,
Yeah.
and that's been really helpful.
Yeah.
I spend 2 hours a week writing blog posts for Brevity that are sort of peripherally marketing. I probably spend 10 hours a week on social media. So that's 12 hours right there. I spend an average of 2 hours a week on writers stuff. So 15 hours a week. And other than that, I don't do a ton of active marketing. If I've got a retreat open, I'll put something on Instagram, I'll put something on Twitter, but I don't purchase ads. I don't spend a lot of time doing ad campaigns. I don't have a funnel,
Right.
So,
Right.
because for me, the most effective funnel is, it's like the heroin dealer on the corner. First one's free. Either it will be such a terrible experience you will never return, or you're mine for life. Please note this webinar does not advocate the use of illegal drugs.
Melissa, I'll say that for me, I try at this point in my business, I try to spend 50 to 70% of my time on what I would call the queen bee work, the stuff that is essential and that people depend on me for. And then there are things that are ancillary to that, that might be like pure marketing work, but in some regard also fulfill the queen bee role. So I would try to think, like, if Melissa, if you were here for the queen bee discussion, the queen bee role is that's the reason you exist, the reason that you're doing this business in the first place. So the goal is to get most of your time on that, and then say 20 to 30 to 40% on other functions that you really can't discard, like maybe billing people. But the Clockwork book talks about how to figure out your queen bee role, you often have to start recognizing that a lot of what you're doing actually has nothing to do with that. And then that frees you up to either delegate it or decide that it's not actually, it doesn't even require your time in the first place. So yeah. And the other, I think, key takeaway from his discussion is you need some time to design your business. And that could mean staring off into space, for 2 hours a week. You need time to think about, how am I going to develop and grow in the future, rather than this running in place problem where you don't make changes that are necessary.
And I definitely need that step back and thinking time. I think it is kind of a symbol of my year that every year I make like a little mandala drawing with, a compass and a ruler in my notebook. And I put my goals in there and I color in the mandala as I achieve the goals. And this year I achieved all of my goals, but I did not start coloring in the mandala until like the other day, because I was sitting with a writer friend who I love and adore, and I was able to chat and color. But I mean, ideally, I would be checking in with my goals, every week and go, okay, what is the next step I can take towards this goal? Can I take this step that week? Is there a thing about this step on my to-do list, and have I scheduled in time?
Yeah.
I'm going to take a personal retreat in January. And I want to spend about half of that time writing and about half of that time thinking about how am I going to change my business. I have been gradually making a list of things that could be, quote unquote, passive income. Like, what events could I do? What webinars could I do that could be on demand webinars, and I don't have to do them live. And I just have not been able to plan out and then execute any of those things because I haven't made the time.
Right. Right. Marissa's asking if there are good examples of tasks to delegate to someone else. She's having a hard time thinking of things. I can go down the list of things that I delegated to Mark when he joined the business. Anything relating to post-production of classes, events, webinars, anything relating to dealing with those customer service requests that inevitably arise from running anything online. He loads all the blog posts into WordPress. He loads he creates drafts of new newsletters that go out. So all I have to do is go in and write. I don't have to futz about with creating the campaign or the initial design. What else? I now have the copy editor for my paid newsletter create all of the tweets, from the newsletter and schedule them in advance. I don't even have to look. She's really close to the material since she's the copy editor, so I trust her to do that. There's someone who loads all of that newsletter content into, this is again, the paid newsletter, into the website so it can be accessed by subscribers online in the future. So that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more, but I think once you start getting, you start believing in yourself as this special super person who can only do this thing. And then you figure out what it means to delegate in a way where you're not being asked a million questions. There's a lot you can delegate.
And Marian asked a really great question in the chat too. Any comments on providing referrals when turning down work? I work with authors mainly through publishers. The publishers hire me, but when authors contact me separately to inquire about my editing, if I turn them down, I feel I should provide a referral. You know, Marian, I have a hard time referring people too, because I feel like if I refer, I've got to be confident that with a big thing like editing a whole book, that the other editor is going to be a good person to give them to, that they're going to do a good job, that they're going to charge a fair price. And two things have helped with that. One is the easiest, which is remind the client, make sure you get a sample edit and a firm price quote before you begin so that you know you're going to be happy with the work, which then takes the guarantee of quality off of my shoulders, and which I should do more often. The other thing that really helps is I have 3 people who work with me on a regular basis as subcontractors, where for the first few, I didn't do a full referral. I funneled the client through me and I took a chunk of money off the top for handling the booking and the contract. And then I reviewed the edit that went out to the client. And that was more time consuming and more intensive to set up. But once I knew, okay, this editor can do a good job, I know they're not going to say anything mean to the client that's going to make the client feel bad. Now I can joyfully and cheerfully refer them without having to process their work through me. The other thing I've done too is I have occasionally looked at editors online or who I know through Facebook groups, and I have then bought a sample edit from them myself with my own work, which A, helped me, and B, educated me more as an editor about what other people are saying, and C, let me go, oh, I am never referring this person to anyone because I have thick enough skin to take this, but this would destroy one of my clients. Or I can go, wow, this person is amazing and insightful. I will definitely say to people, you know, I don't have an official relationship with this person, but I recommend so-and-so. I know that she did a nice job on a thing for me. And so that really helps. So you've got the low key way, which is remind the client how to protect themselves. And you've got the more intensive way, which is if you want a regular subcontractor, do something official where you review their work a couple times. And I'm super lucky too, because I just taught an editing workshop where I got to see work from a whole bunch of editors. And there's people in there that I'm like, ooh, this person would be a great person to refer people to. And so I had that benefit as well.
I've been asked for referrals for so many years that I ended up coming up with like an 8-page resource list. I'm asked for referrals, not just for editing, but design and marketing, publicity, and help with ads, and you name it, I've been asked. So I now have a resource list that has like 1 billion caveats attached to it at the beginning. I tell people I have no financial interest in them hiring any of these people, which I don't. They're just people that I trust, that people who have a good reputation. And then I send people to specific advice on how to hire an editor, how to be careful about hiring a publicist because you're about to spend a lot of money and not make it up in sales, et cetera, et cetera. So now when I get those requests, I just say, here's my list. Best of luck.
You know, Jane, when you say that, you know, you've written stuff about how to hire a publicist, how to hire an editor, those are publicly available blog posts on your site. And I have posts on those topics too that are publicly available on the Brevity website. And that's something where you don't even have to provide your own backup information. You can just send them a link to something Jane wrote if you trust Jane, or another source that you trust. Somebody else has already done that work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Marisa asks, is the resource list on your website?
So here's the interesting thing. I have 2 resource lists. One is public on my website. The other is private, that I only send to people who are looking and reach out to me specifically. I'm not going to get into the detail of how this occurred, only that it serves me very well. So if some of you are curious about this private list, just email me. Any email address will do, or you can contact me through my website and you can take a look.
Awesome.
All right. I think we have reached maybe the end of this amazing session.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you, everybody who took time out of your day to come. I hope you got stuff that helped you with your issues. And it helps me be honest with myself when I'm also being honest with you. And it really honors me that you're here because I feel like you're supporting me in this as well. So thank you very much.
And this is for those who are curious about the next business clinic. It's not scheduled yet. You are welcome to apply to be my next client, which obviously you have to be comfortable with discussing your problems in public. There you can find a link to the application at my website. It's under online classes and business clinic. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Happy holidays, great weekend to you, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jane.